For 18 months, Nathan Brooks counted his pills twice a day, once in the morning when his leg ached, once at night when the nightmares came. The wounded veteran had exactly $8,400 to his name when he bought the condemned hunting cabin deep in the Cascade Woods, a structure most people wouldn't use for storage. His brother called him insane. The real estate agent called it a liability. But when his rescue dog Ranger started digging at a rotted section of floor in the main room, Nathan discovered something that would connect him to a mystery 70 years in the making, and a family that had been searching for answers since 1952. What Nathan didn't know was that his desperate escape into isolation had led him to the one place that could finally bring peace to strangers who'd become family. This is the story of how one veteran's retreat from the world became the key to unlocking someone else's lifetime of grief. The October rain turned the logging road into a river of mud. Nathan Brooks gripped the steering wheel of his truck, watching the headlights cut through Douglas fir trunks that seemed to close in from both sides. Ranger sat in the passenger seat, alert but quiet, reading Nathan's tension the way he always did. $8,400. That's what Nathan had scraped together after selling everything he owned, his furniture, his tools, even his dress uniform. Everything except his truck, his dog, and the pills that kept the pain manageable. $8,000 for a cabin so deep in the Washington mountains that the GPS had given up 2 miles back. The realtor had been brutally honest. "Mr. Brooks, I'm legally obligated to tell you this property has been condemned. No running water, no electricity. The structure is technically unsafe. You'd be buying it as is, and I strongly advise against it." Nathan had signed the papers anyway. He'd viewed the cabin once, 3 weeks ago, during a rare sunny day that had made the moss-covered logs look almost picturesque. Now, in the rain, with darkness falling, it looked like something from a horror movie. But it was his, bought outright. No mortgage, no landlord, no neighbors asking questions about why he flinched at car backfires, or why he sometimes sat on his apartment balcony at 3 a.m., smoking cigarettes he didn't even want. The cabin appeared through the trees, a squat structure with a sagging roofline and windows that were mostly intact. Small victories. Nathan killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to rain drum on the truck's roof. His phone buzzed. His brother Sean. "Just landed in Portland. Changed my mind. Coming to talk you out of this. Text me the address." Nathan turned off his phone. Ranger whined softly, pawed at the door. The dog had been with him 14 months, pulled from a shelter 2 counties over after Nathan's therapist suggested a service dog might help with the PTSD. Ranger wasn't officially trained, but he'd learned Nathan's patterns. Knew when the panic was building, knew when to press his solid weight against Nathan's leg until the world stopped spinning. "All right, buddy, let's see what we bought." The cabin was worse inside than Nathan remembered. Water damage bloomed across the walls in abstract patterns. The fireplace was full of ancient ash and what looked like a bird's nest. The wooden floor was spongy in places, and when Nathan stepped too hard near the kitchen area, the board cracked ominously. But it was quiet, isolated, 23 miles from the nearest town, down a road that would be impassable in winter. Perfect for someone who'd spent 18 months trying to disappear without actually dying. Nathan had been a Marine Corps combat engineer. 2 tours in Afghanistan, building and clearing roads, disarming IEDs, keeping convoys moving. The blast that ended his career had killed his best friend and torn up Nathan's right leg so badly the doctors had considered amputation. They'd saved it technically, left him with metal pins, chronic pain, and a limp that got worse when he was tired, which was always. He'd tried civilian life, tried therapy, medication, support groups, tried dating, working office jobs, pretending he was fine, but the world was too loud, too crowded, too full of people who didn't understand why a drop book sent him diving for cover or why he couldn't sleep, unless his back was to a wall. So he'd cashed out, sold everything, bought the most remote, run-down property he could afford. Maybe he'd fix it up. Maybe he'd just exist here, away from everyone, until the pills ran out or the nightmares stopped. Either way, it would be on his terms. Nathan unloaded supplies from the truck: sleeping bag, camping stove, battery-powered lanterns, 2 weeks of canned food. Ranger explored the cabin's 2 rooms, nose to the ground, tail wagging despite the decay. Dogs were resilient like that. They didn't care if a place was falling apart as long as they were with their person. The rain intensified as darkness fell completely. Nathan set up his sleeping bag in the corner farthest from the leaks, lit a lantern, opened a can of chili. Ranger got kibble and some jerky Nathan probably shouldn't have spent money on. They ate in silence. The cabin creaked and groaned around them, settling or collapsing. Hard to tell which. Nathan pulled out the bottle of pills, took one for the pain in his leg, considered taking another for the pain everywhere else, decided against it. He was alone now, truly alone. Had to stay sharp, had to be able to hear if something or someone approached. Old habits, combat habits, never fully gone. Ranger finished eating and padded over, resting his head on Nathan's thigh. The dog's brown eyes were steady, trusting. Nathan scratched behind his ears. "We're going to be okay out here," Nathan said. He needed to believe it. No people, no noise, just us and the trees. Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. Nathan lay down in his sleeping bag. Ranger curled against his back. Rain hammered the roof. Wind howled through gaps in the walls. The cabin smelled like mold and rotting wood and failure, but it was his failure, his isolation, his choice to step away from a world that had broken him and expected him to somehow be unbroken. Tomorrow he'd start making repairs, maybe clear the fireplace, patch some holes. Small goals, manageable tasks. One day at a time, like the therapist always said. Tonight, though, he just needed to survive being alone with his thoughts in a place so remote that no one would hear him scream if the nightmares came. Nathan closed his eyes, felt Ranger's warmth, listened to the rain, and for the first time in months, wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The cold woke Nathan before dawn. His breath misted in the frigid air, and when he checked his phone, which he'd turned back on out of habit, the temperature read 38 degrees, inside. Ranger was already up, pawing at the door. Nathan let him out, watched the dog disappear into the gray morning mist. The rain had stopped, leaving everything dripping and silent. No traffic sounds, no voices, just the distant call of a raven and the drip, drip, drip of water from damaged gutters. Nathan's leg was stiff, cramping. He took another pill dry, chased it with cold water from one of the jugs he'd brought. The cabin looked worse in daylight, every crack visible, every sag obvious. The front window had a spiderweb of cracks he hadn't noticed before. The stove was rusted through. The sink was full of leaves and dead insects. This was home now. He spent the morning making basic repairs, nailed a tarp over the worst section of roof, swept out debris, cleared the fireplace. Ranger supervised from the porch, occasionally wandering off to investigate the surrounding woods before returning to check on Nathan. By noon, Nathan's hands were blistered and his leg was screaming. He'd used up his supply of pain pills for the day and wouldn't allow himself more. The prescription was meant to last 2 months. After that, he'd have to figure something out. His phone buzzed. Sean again. "Nathan, seriously, I'm worried. Call me." Then his mom. "Your brother says you bought a cabin? Honey, please tell me you're not doing something drastic." Nathan turned the phone off again. They didn't understand. Couldn't understand. They wanted him to be the person he was before, confident, social, unbroken. That person was dead, had died in the same explosion that killed Martinez and shattered Nathan's leg. What was left was this: a hollow man in a hollow cabin, trying to find some way to exist without causing pain to everyone around him. Ranger barked sharply from the front of the cabin. Nathan grabbed the old baseball bat he'd found in the truck bed, his only weapon, and moved to the door. A deer stood 30 yards away, watching them. Ranger's tail wagged slowly, his posture curious rather than aggressive. The deer held eye contact for a long moment, then bounded away into the mist. Nathan exhaled, put down the bat. His hands were shaking. Even out here, 23 miles from anything, his body expected danger, prepared for threats. Couldn't accept that maybe, finally, there was nothing coming to hurt him. He made coffee on the camping stove. Instant, bitter, but hot. Sat on the porch steps despite the cold. Ranger came and sat beside him, leaning his weight against Nathan's side. "You think I'm crazy, don't you?" Nathan asked the dog. Ranger just looked at him with those steady brown eyes. The afternoon brought more work. Nathan patched a hole in the wall with scrap wood, replaced a section of rotted floorboard near the door. The physical labor helped, kept his mind occupied, tired his body enough that maybe he'd sleep tonight without dreams. But as the sun set and the temperature dropped again, reality settled in like the cold. He had no heat beyond the camping stove, no way to cook beyond one burner, no shower, no toilet, no electricity. His home was barely shelter. And he had maybe $6,000 left after buying supplies. That would last 3 months, maybe 4 if he was careful. Then what? Nathan didn't know, couldn't think that far ahead. He made dinner, more canned chili, bread that was already getting stale. Ranger got his kibble and the last of the jerky. They ate as darkness closed in and the temperature continued dropping. Nathan built a small fire in the fireplace, testing whether the chimney still drew properly. Smoke backed up initially, then cleared. The fire provided light and minimal warmth, but it was something. Progress. He checked his leg in the firelight. The scarring ran from his knee to his ankle, angry red lines where surgeons had pieced him back together. The skin was tight, painful to touch. The doctor said he should do stretches, physical therapy, keep it mobile. Nathan hadn't. Moving it hurt. Everything hurt. Easier to just take the pills and try not to think about how one explosion had stolen his future. Ranger whined, sensing Nathan's spiral, pushed his head under Nathan's hand. "I'm okay," Nathan lied. The dog knew better, always knew. That night, Nathan lay in his sleeping bag, watching fire shadows dance across the ceiling. The cabin creaked and settled. Wind moaned through the trees outside. It should have been peaceful. Instead, Nathan felt the weight of every choice that had led him here. Every relationship he'd sabotaged because getting close meant eventually hurting someone. Every job he'd quit because the structure and expectations felt like chains. Every pill he'd taken to numb the screaming in his head. He'd run to the most remote place he could find, and somehow he'd brought all his demons with him. Ranger moved closer, pressed his warm body against Nathan's side. The dog's breathing was steady, calm, a rhythm Nathan tried to match. Maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe he'd wake up and the repairs would feel like progress instead of futility. Maybe the isolation would feel like peace instead of abandonment. Or maybe this was it. Maybe he'd spend whatever time he had left slowly fixing a broken cabin while remaining broken himself, alone in the woods where no one had to watch him fall apart. Nathan closed his eyes, felt tears he refused to shed burning behind his eyelids. Outside, an owl called. The fire popped and crackled. Ranger's heartbeat was steady against his ribs, and in the darkness of his rundown cabin, 23 miles from anything resembling civilization, Nathan Brooks wondered if he'd finally found the place where he could disappear completely. 300 miles south in Portland, Oregon, Eleanor Whitmore sat in her study overlooking the city lights. At 76, she'd built an empire in commercial real estate, But tonight she wasn't thinking about properties or profit margins. She was thinking about her father. On her desk sat a leather journal, worn, water-stained, found in a safe deposit box after her mother's death 6 months ago. Eleanor had been reading it obsessively since, learning things about her family she'd never known. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, had been a timber baron in the 1940s, rich, powerful, respected. He'd owned thousands of acres of forest land throughout Washington and Oregon, built a fortune on Douglas fir and cedar. But in 1952, something had changed him. Eleanor turned to the journal entry dated September 15th, 1952. I've made a terrible mistake. The surveyor I hired, Jacob Morrison, discovered something on the northern property, evidence of the indigenous burial sites I swore didn't exist when I bought the land. Jacob wanted to report it, halt the logging. I couldn't let that happen. The contracts were signed, the equipment moved in, thousands of dollars committed. I offered him money to stay quiet. He refused, said some things are more important than profit. So I did something I'll regret forever. I made sure he couldn't report what he found, made it look like an accident on one of the logging roads. But before he died, Jacob hid his survey documents and photographs, wrote me a letter saying he'd made copies, left them somewhere I'd never find them, said the truth would come out eventually, that justice doesn't die with witnesses. I've searched for 3 years, every property, every storage unit, every place Jacob might have accessed. Nothing. The man was smarter than I gave him credit for. He's been dead since 52, and he's still outsmarting me from the grave. I'm dying now. Cancer, the doctors say. 6 months. And I'll die knowing that somewhere, evidence of my crime exists. My children will inherit my fortune built on blood and lies, and I can't stop it. If whoever finds this journal cares about justice, find Jacob Morrison's documents. They're hidden somewhere on my properties. Make it right. I can't, but maybe someone can. Eleanor had been reading that entry for weeks, trying to piece together what it meant. Her father died in 1955. By then, the indigenous burial sites had been destroyed, the timber harvested, the land sold off, but Jacob Morrison's hidden evidence, that remained lost. Eleanor had hired investigators, researched her father's properties from 1952. Most had been sold decades ago, subdivided, developed. But one remained in the family trust, forgotten until a recent audit. A small parcel in the Cascades with a condemned hunting cabin. The property had been worthless timberland. Too remote, too steep, too expensive to log. Her father had used it as a personal hunting retreat. After his death, it had sat unused for decades, forgotten in the massive Whitmore estate. Until last month, when the property tax bill came due, and Eleanor's accountant flagged it for sale. Ms. Whitmore? Her assistant, Jennifer Collins, appeared in the doorway. I have the information you requested on the cabin property. Eleanor looked up. And? It sold 3 weeks ago. Cash sale, $8,400 to a veteran named Nathan Brooks. Jennifer hesitated. Ma'am, are you sure about this? The property is condemned. If this Morrison evidence exists, it's been 70 years. It's probably destroyed. Or it's still there. Eleanor stood, walked to the window. Below, Portland sprawled in every direction, a city built partly on her family's fortune, a fortune built on a crime her father had taken to his grave. What do we know about the buyer? Jennifer consulted her tablet. Nathan Brooks, age 32, Marine Corps veteran, medically discharged 18 months ago, was injured in Afghanistan, lives alone, purchased the property through a real estate agent in Concrete, Washington. No phone number on file, no forwarding address. Paid cash, a veteran, alone, buying a condemned cabin with what was probably everything he had. Eleanor thought about Jacob Morrison, a surveyor who'd done the right thing and paid for it with his life. About her father, who'd built an empire on murder and lies. About herself, inheriting wealth she now knew was blood money. "I need to find him," Eleanor said. "This Nathan Brooks. He owns the property now. If Morrison's evidence is there, he has a right to know. And I have an obligation to make this right. Ma'am, with respect, what if he doesn't want to be found? What if he bought that remote property specifically to get away from people?" Eleanor considered that. A veteran, isolated, in a condemned structure. Someone running from something, just like her father had run from his guilt. "Then I'll respect that," she said quietly. "But I have to try. My father murdered a good man and hid the evidence. For 70 years, Jacob Morrison's family has lived without answers, without justice. If there's any chance at all, that evidence still exists, I owe it to them to look." She turned back to her desk, picked up the journal. Her father's confession, discovered too late for criminal prosecution, but not too late for the truth. "Prepare a trip to Concrete, Washington," Eleanor told Jennifer. "Discreetly, I don't want to frighten him. Just find out if he's okay, if he'll talk to me, if he's found anything unusual. And if he has." Eleanor looked at the journal one more time, at her father's handwriting, shaky in his final months, at his admission that some crimes outlive their perpetrators, waiting in the dark for justice. "Then I'll do what my father should have done 70 years ago," she said. "I'll tell the truth, even if it costs me everything." 2 weeks into living in the cabin, Nathan woke to find frost on the inside of the windows. His breath clouded the air. His sleeping bag, rated for 40 degrees, wasn't enough. Ranger was pressed against him, sharing warmth, but Nathan's teeth chattered as he fumbled for his jacket. November in the Cascades. He'd known it would be cold. Hadn't quite grasped what cold meant 23 miles from any heat source besides fire. Nathan checked his phone. 31 degrees outside, probably 28 inside. His water jugs had ice forming on top. His hands were stiff, painful as he tried to light the camping stove for coffee. The wood supply was the immediate problem. The cabin had a fireplace, but Nathan had been rationing wood, knowing winter was coming and he couldn't afford to buy more. Now he needed heat and had maybe a week of fuel left. He spent the morning cutting fallen trees with a handsaw, back-breaking work that left his legs screaming and his hands blistered. Ranger stayed close, occasionally disappearing to chase something in the undergrowth before returning to check on Nathan. By afternoon, Nathan had enough wood for maybe 3 days. His hands were bleeding. His leg had given out twice, sending him to his knees in the wet forest floor. He was exhausted, freezing, and running out of pain pills. Back at the cabin, Nathan built a fire and sat as close to it as he could without catching fire himself. His phone showed 17 missed calls, his brother, his mom, the VA hospital where he was supposed to be doing outpatient therapy. He'd missed 2 appointments. They'd probably dropped him from the program. Didn't matter. Therapy hadn't helped anyway. Just forced him to talk about things he wanted to forget, while a well-meaning counselor took notes and suggested coping strategies that assumed he wanted to cope. Nathan didn't want to cope. He wanted the noise in his head to stop, wanted to sleep without dreaming of Martinez's body, of the explosion, of the moment Nathan realized his leg was gone below the knee and his best friend was gone everywhere. Ranger whined, pushed his nose into Nathan's hand. The dog knew, always knew. "I'm okay, buddy." Lies, all lies. That evening, Nathan explored more of the cabin, looking for anything useful he might have missed. The main room, a small bedroom, a bathroom with no plumbing. He'd searched everything, except the floor. Ranger had been obsessed with one corner of the main room for days, scratching, sniffing, whining at a section of floorboard that looked slightly different from the others. Nathan had assumed mice. Now, desperate for distraction from the cold and the pain, he investigated. The board was loose, Deliberately loose, he realized, with small notches cut into it for leverage. Nathan pried it up with his pocket knife. Underneath was older flooring, and beneath that, darkness, a gap, a space. He grabbed his flashlight, shined it down. The beam revealed rough earth, timber supports, and what looked like stairs? What the hell? Nathan carefully pried up more boards. Ranger pawed at the opening, tail wagging excitedly. Beneath the cabin floor was a set of wooden stairs descending into darkness. A basement? A root cellar? Nathan hadn't seen any mention of this in the property documents. The cabin was supposed to be a simple single-story structure, but these stairs were clearly intentional, well built, hidden under the main floor. He grabbed his flashlight and camping lantern, started down carefully, testing each step. The stairs were solid despite their age, descending maybe 8 feet before reaching a dirt floor. The room was small, 8 by 10 feet, with timber walls and a ceiling just high enough for Nathan to stand. And against the far wall, wrapped in canvas tarp, were several wooden crates. Nathan's heart raced. He approached carefully, half expecting booby traps or collapse. But the room was stable, dry despite being underground. He opened the first crate. Inside, papers, files, photographs, all protected in sealed plastic bags. Nathan pulled out a file. The label read, Morrison Survey, Northern Cascade Sites, September 1952. He opened another crate. More files, more photographs, maps, field notes. Everything meticulously documented and preserved. In the third crate, he found a letter. To whoever finds this. My name is Jacob Morrison. I was a surveyor for Whitmore Timber Company. In September 1952, I discovered evidence of indigenous burial sites on property Thomas Whitmore was preparing to log. When I tried to report this, Whitmore offered me money to stay quiet. When I refused, he tried to kill me. I survived the first attempt, an accident with a logging truck that broke my back and left me unable to walk. The doctors say I have months, maybe a year. Whitmore thinks the evidence died with my ability to report it. He's wrong. I've hidden everything here. Surveys, photographs, witness statements. All the proof needed to stop the logging, protect the burial sites, and hold Whitmore accountable for his crimes. If you're reading this, I'm dead. Whitmore probably is too. But the truth doesn't die. Justice doesn't have a statute of limitations. Take this evidence to the authorities, to the indigenous tribes whose ancestors' graves were desecrated, to anyone who will listen. My death purchased these documents. Don't let it be for nothing. Jacob Morrison, March 1953. Nathan sat back on his heels, processing. A surveyor, a cover-up, a murder essentially. Morrison had died before he could report what he knew. And for 70 years, this evidence had been hidden beneath a cabin floor, waiting. He looked through more files. Photographs of burial sites before the logging. Documentation of artifacts. Letters from Whitmore threatening Morrison. Bank records showing attempted bribery. This was dynamite. Historical, criminal, cultural dynamite. And it was in Nathan's hands now. Ranger barked from the top of the stairs, anxious. Nathan climbed up, brought the camping lantern down for better light. Spent hours reading through documents, understanding the scope of what Morrison had discovered and Whitmore had tried to bury. By the time Nathan climbed back up, it was past midnight. He was freezing, exhausted, but his mind was racing. This wasn't his fight, wasn't his problem. He'd bought a cabin to escape, to disappear, not to get involved in some 70-year-old conspiracy about timber rights and indigenous burial sites. But Morrison's letter kept echoing in his head. My death purchased these documents. Don't let it be for nothing. Nathan knew what it meant to die for something. Martinez had died for oil rights, terrorism, politics, abstractions that meant nothing to the people who actually did the dying. But Morrison had died trying to protect something sacred, trying to do the right thing despite the cost. And for 70 years, his sacrifice had been for nothing. Because no one knew. No one had found the evidence, until now. Nathan rebuilt the fire, sat close to the flames. Ranger curled up beside him, finally calm now that the mystery under the floor was solved. "What do you think, buddy?" Nathan asked the dog. "Do we get involved in this?" Ranger's tail thumped once. Nathan pulled out his phone. 17 missed calls. He'd been ignoring the world, hiding from everything and everyone. But maybe hiding wasn't the answer. Maybe there was something here, something important, something that mattered, that only he could finish. Morrison had tried to do the right thing and died for it. Nathan had tried to do the right thing in Afghanistan and watched his friend die for it. Maybe this was his chance to make sure someone's sacrifice actually meant something. Nathan looked at the loose floorboards, at the evidence hidden below, at the phone in his hand. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he'd figure out what to do, who to call, how to finish what Jacob Morrison started. Tonight, he just needed to accept that his retreat from the world had somehow brought him exactly where he needed to be. Nathan was outside splitting wood when Ranger barked sharply, his alert bark, the one that meant someone was coming. Nathan grabbed the axe handle tighter, turned toward the sound of an approaching vehicle. Through the trees, a black SUV navigated the muddy logging road. Expensive, out of place. Nathan's instincts screamed danger. No one had any reason to be out here except to cause problems. The SUV stopped 30 yards from the cabin. 2 people emerged, an elderly woman in elegant outdoor wear, and a younger woman carrying what looked like a briefcase. Nathan didn't lower the axe. Ranger stood at his side, alert but not aggressive. The elderly woman walked forward carefully, mindful of the muddy ground. She stopped at a respectful distance. "Nathan Brooks? Depends who's asking." "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I need to speak with you about the property you purchased." Whitmore, the name from Morrison's documents. Nathan's grip on the axe tightened. Not interested in selling. "I'm not here to buy it." She gestured toward the cabin. "May I come closer? I'm 76 and this terrain isn't easy for me." Against his better judgment, Nathan nodded. Eleanor approached, her assistant following at a distance. Ranger sniffed her hand, tail wagging. The dog was a terrible guard dog, loved everyone. "I'll be direct," Eleanor said. "My family used to own this property. My father, Thomas Whitmore, used this cabin as a hunting retreat in the 1940s and 50s. He died in 1955. After he died, I found something, a journal, where he confessed to a crime." Nathan's heart rate kicked up. What kind of crime? In 1952, a surveyor named Jacob Morrison discovered indigenous burial sites on land my father was preparing to log. Morrison tried to report it. My father tried to silence him, permanently. Morrison was injured, eventually died from complications. Her voice was steady but strained. Before he died, Morrison hid evidence. My father spent his last years searching for it. He never found it. Nathan didn't respond, waited. "I believe he hid it here," Eleanor continued. "In or near this cabin. I don't know where. I was hoping the property records would show something, or that whoever bought it might have found something unusual." The silence stretched. Nathan could feel the weight of Morrison's documents beneath his feet, literally beneath the floor. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because my family's fortune was built on murder and theft." Eleanor's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because Jacob Morrison deserves justice, even 70 years later. Because the indigenous tribes whose sacred sites were destroyed deserve to know what happened, to recover what they can." She paused. "And because if evidence exists, you own this property now. You have every legal right to it, but you also have a moral obligation to know what you're sitting on." Nathan studied her. She looked genuine, desperate even. But people lied. People always had agendas. What do you want from me? Permission to search the property, to find the evidence if it exists, to make this right. Eleanor reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a worn leather journal. This is my father's confession. I'll show you. You can read it. Decide for yourself. She extended the journal. Nathan set down the axe, took it carefully, flipped through pages. Thomas Whitmore's handwriting was shaky, desperate in places. The confessions matched what Nathan had read in Morrison's documents. You could have just kept quiet, Nathan said. Your father's dead. Morrison's dead. Who would know? I would know. Eleanor's voice was firm. And knowing I inherited blood money while Jacob Morrison's family never got answers, that's not something I can live with. Not at 76, when I'm running out of time to make things right. Nathan looked at Ranger, who was still wagging his tail at Eleanor. The dog liked her. Ranger's judgment was usually good. Come inside, Nathan said finally. There's something you need to see. He led them into the cabin. Eleanor looked around at the disrepair, the camping stove, the sleeping bag in the corner. Her expression shifted, concern, maybe pity. Nathan hated it. I found something, he said, gesturing to the loose floorboards. 3 days ago, my dog kept scratching at the floor. There's a hidden room underneath. Eleanor's breath caught. You found it? Everything. Surveys, photographs, letters, Morrison's confession. Evidence of everything your father did. Nathan knelt, pulled up the floorboards. It's all down there, preserved, waiting 70 years. Eleanor's legs gave out. Her assistant caught her, helped her sit on one of the folding chairs Nathan had set up. Tears streamed down the old woman's face. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God. Nathan descended the stairs, brought up several of the files, set them on the makeshift table. Eleanor reached for them with shaking hands. She read Morrison's letter first, wept openly, then looked through photographs, surveys, documentation. It's all here, she said. Everything needed to expose what my father did, to protect what's left of the sites, to give Morrison's family closure. So what now? Nathan asked. Eleanor looked up at him. That's your decision. You own this property. You found this evidence. Legally, it belongs to you. I don't want it. I didn't think you would, she wiped her eyes. But I'd like to propose something. Let me take this evidence, all of it, to the appropriate authorities, the indigenous tribes, the historical societies, the legal system. Let me be the one to expose my father's crimes and make whatever restitution is possible. And what do I get? Eleanor studied him, saw the camping stove, the worn sleeping bag, the obvious signs that he was barely surviving in this condemned structure. What do you need? She asked quietly. Nathan almost laughed. What did he need? Heat, running water, pain medication, a reason to wake up in the morning, a way to make the nightmares stop. Nothing, he said. Just take the evidence. Finish what Morrison started. Nathan, may I call you Nathan? You're living in a condemned cabin with no utilities, 23 miles from anyone. You're a veteran, clearly struggling. Her voice was gentle. You found something that matters, something that changes lives. Let me help you in return. I didn't find it for a reward. I know. That's exactly why I want to help. Eleanor glanced at her assistant. Jennifer, show him the proposal. Jennifer opened her briefcase, pulled out documents. Ms. Whitmore instructed us to prepare several options, depending on what we found. If you're willing to transfer the Morrison evidence to the Whitmore Foundation, we can offer compensation for your discovery, assistance with the property, or both. Nathan looked at the papers, saw numbers that didn't make sense. $50,000, $100,000, more. This is insane, he said. This is justice, Eleanor corrected. Jacob Morrison died trying to protect sacred sites. You found the evidence that can finally make that sacrifice meaningful. That's not insane. That's divine intervention, and I don't even believe in God. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the forest. My father built a fortune worth $40 million. Blood money, all of it. I can't undo what he did, but I can make sure the people he hurt are compensated. I can make sure you're compensated for doing what's right when you didn't have to. Nathan shook his head. I just need the cabin to be livable. Then that's what you'll get. Eleanor turned back to him. Let me have the property assessed. Let me hire contractors to make it safe, warm, functional. You keep your isolation, your privacy, but you get to live like a human being while you figure out what comes next. Why do you care what happens to me? Because Morrison cared about doing the right thing, even when it cost him everything. Because you found his legacy and respected it. Because I've spent 76 years inheriting wealth I didn't earn, and I'd like to finally do something that matters with it. Eleanor's eyes were intense, and because every veteran who serves deserves better than freezing in a condemned cabin, alone. Nathan felt something crack inside him. The wall he'd built, the isolation he'd sought. Eleanor's words found the cracks in his armor. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Say yes, Eleanor replied. Let me help you. Let me honor Morrison's memory by helping the person who found his truth. Ranger pushed his head under Nathan's hand. Steady, trusting, believing this was right. Nathan looked at the documents, at Morrison's letter, at 70 years of hidden truth, at his chance to make sure someone's sacrifice finally mattered. Okay, he said quietly. Yes. Nathan didn't cash the check Eleanor gave him for 3 weeks. It sat on the makeshift table, weighted down by a camping lantern, while contractors assessed the cabin. $50,000, written in elegant script on expensive paper, with the Whitmore Foundation letterhead. It doesn't feel right, he told Ranger one evening. They were sitting by the fire, now a proper fire, since Eleanor had arranged for 2 cords of seasoned firewood to be delivered. I didn't do this for money. Ranger watched him with patient eyes. The contractors were working during daylight hours now, replacing the roof, installing a wood stove, running a water line from a spring uphill. Eleanor had been ruthlessly efficient. Permits expedited, materials delivered, work crews on site within days. Nathan tried to pay for some of it from the check. Eleanor refused. That money is yours, she'd told him firmly, for finding the evidence. The repairs are separate, my obligation for my family's crimes. But I'm benefiting from your father's crimes then. No, you're benefiting from completing Morrison's mission. There's a difference. Nathan didn't see the difference. Felt like he was profiting from someone else's tragedy either way. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He'd gotten in the habit of answering now that the phone was charged, and he wasn't hiding quite so completely. Mr. Brooks, this is Jennifer Collins from the Whitmore Foundation. Ms. Whitmore asked me to check if you've deposited the check. Not yet. She was worried you might be having second thoughts. I am. Silence on the line. Then, she'd like to speak with you. Can she call? I guess. 5 minutes later, Eleanor. Nathan, Jennifer says you haven't cashed the check. I can't accept this. It's too much. I just found something that was already there. You found something that had been hidden for 70 years. Something my entire family failed to locate despite searching. Something that's going to expose decades of corruption and honor a good man's sacrifice. Eleanor's voice was gentle. Why can't you accept that matters? Because I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have. Anyone wouldn't have. That's the point. She sighed. Nathan, I've been reading about you. Jennifer did research. I know you were injured in Afghanistan. I know your friend died. I know you've been struggling. Nathan's jaw tightened. That doesn't have anything to do with this. It has everything to do with this. You're someone who understands sacrifice, who knows what it means to try to do the right thing and pay for it. That's exactly why you're the right person to finish Morrison's work. I just found his documents. And you could have kept them, sold them, used them for your own gain. You didn't. Your first instinct was to find someone who could use them to make things right. Eleanor paused. That's not nothing, Nathan. That's character. And character is worth compensating. Nathan looked around the cabin. Contractors had replaced half the roof. The wood stove was installed, radiating heat properly. Water lines were being connected. In a week, this place would be genuinely livable. I feel like I'm taking advantage of the situation, he admitted. Then use the money for something that matters. Help other veterans. Fund a memorial for Morrison. Donate it all to the indigenous tribes your discovery helped. I don't care what you do with it. Just accept that what you found has value and you deserve to benefit from that. Ranger nudged Nathan's hand. The dog had been healthier, happier since the contractors arrived. More people around, more activity, less of Nathan's despair infecting every moment. There's something else, Eleanor said. The Morrison evidence is generating significant attention. Historical societies, indigenous councils, legal scholars, they want to meet the person who found it. They want to thank you. No, Nathan, I don't want attention, don't want to be a story. I just want to be left alone. I understand, and I'll protect your privacy, but I need you to understand that what you did matters to people, deeply, and sometimes receiving gratitude is as important as earning it. Nathan didn't know how to respond to that. Cash the check, Eleanor said firmly. Make the cabin warm and safe. Feed your dog good food instead of whatever bargain kibble you've been buying. Let yourself accept that doing the right thing, even accidentally, deserves recognition. She hung up before Nathan could argue further. He sat there, phone in hand, Ranger at his feet. The cabin was warmer than it had been in weeks. The roof no longer leaked. Clean water would flow from a tap by Friday, all because he'd bought a condemned cabin and his dog had scratched at the floor. That evening, Nathan walked down to the hidden room one last time. Most of Morrison's documents were gone, cataloged, preserved, distributed to appropriate authorities. But Eleanor had left copies, insisted Nathan keep them. He read Morrison's letter again. My death purchased these documents. Don't let it be for nothing. Morrison had tried to protect sacred ground, had been murdered for it, had spent his dying months hiding evidence, so his sacrifice would eventually matter. And 70 years later, a broken veteran and a rescue dog had found it. Nathan thought about Martinez, about the explosion that killed his friend and shattered Nathan's leg, about how Martinez had died for oil rights and political abstractions, and nothing that actually mattered. But Morrison had died for something real, something that connected 70 years later to indigenous tribes, who finally got answers, to justice that finally arrived, to sacred ground that might finally be protected. That was what sacrifice was supposed to look like. Not dying for nothing. Dying for something that echoed forward through time until someone heard it. Nathan climbed back upstairs, found the check, looked at it one more time. $50,000 for finding what had been lost, for finishing what Morrison started, for being in the right place at the right time with a dog who wouldn't stop scratching at the floor. He could fix the cabin completely, buy tools, get proper winter clothes, maybe even get his pain medication situation stabilized without choosing between pills and food. Maybe even find a way to help other veterans who were where he'd been 3 weeks ago. Desperate, isolated, counting their last dollars and wondering if disappearing was the only answer left. Nathan folded the check carefully, put it in his wallet, decided he'd drive to town tomorrow, cash it, start living like someone who deserved to be alive. Okay, buddy, he told Ranger, we're going to accept this, but not because we deserve it, because Morrison deserved to have his mission completed, and maybe helping us is part of how that happens. Ranger's tail wagged. The dog didn't care about philosophy or guilt or whether Nathan felt worthy. The dog just knew they were safe now, warm, FED, together. Sometimes that was enough. 3 months later, the cabin was transformed. New roof, new windows, proper insulation, running water from the spring, a functional bathroom, a wood stove that kept the entire structure warm, solar panels on the roof for electricity, internet via satellite. Nathan walked through it sometimes, disbelieving. This was the same structure he'd bought for $8,400, the same condemned wreck he'd planned to freeze in. Now it was a home. Eleanor visited twice, once to see the completed renovations, once to deliver news. The indigenous tribes have taken possession of Morrison's survey sites, she told him over coffee in his now functional kitchen. They're conducting ceremonies, cataloging what's left. It's not enough, can never be enough, but it's something. That's good. Morrison's family, his great-granddaughter actually, wants to meet you. She's been trying to find information about her great-grandfather's death for years. This gave her closure. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. I don't need thanks. I know, but she needs to give it. Eleanor sipped her coffee. I'm setting up a foundation, the Morrison Memorial Fund, to protect indigenous sites, support ethical archaeology, fund education about the timber industry's impacts. Your discovery made it possible. Your money made it possible. Blood money, Nathan. I'm just redirecting it towards something good. She set down her cup. I'd like you to be involved. Advisory board, maybe help with veteran outreach. You understand things about service and sacrifice that I never will. I'm not qualified for that. You're perfectly qualified, you're just convinced you're not worthy. Eleanor's gaze was steady. That's trauma talking, not truth. Nathan didn't argue. She was probably right. Ranger had settled in beautifully. The dog spent his days exploring the forest, his evenings by the wood stove. He'd gained weight. His coat was glossy. He still had nightmares sometimes, thrashed and whimpered in his sleep, but less frequently now. Nathan had nightmares too, still, but in a warm cabin with a full stomach and pain medication he could afford, they were more manageable. The sharp edges of desperation had softened. He'd started talking to his brother again, his mom. Not often, but regularly. Video calls where he showed them the cabin renovations, talked about Ranger, carefully avoided discussing why he'd bought a condemned property with his last dollars in the first place. They worried. He knew they worried. But they worried less now that he wasn't obviously dying in a frozen wreck. In January, Eleanor called with a proposal. I'm buying more properties, remote, inexpensive, condemned structures that veterans could renovate and live in. Create a program, housing, support, community for veterans who need isolation, but not death. Nathan's breath caught. That's a big project. So was exposing my father's crimes. So was honoring Morrison's legacy. Big projects are what I do. She paused. I want you to help design it. You know what veterans need, what doesn't work about traditional support systems, how to create space for healing without forced socialization. Eleanor, I'm barely functional myself. You're functional enough, and you're honest about your struggles, which makes you more qualified than people who've never suffered. Her voice was firm. Besides, this isn't a job offer, it's a partnership. You consult, advise, share your perspective. I'll handle logistics and funding. Nathan looked around his cabin, at the space that had saved him, the repairs that had given him purpose, the warmth that had made survival possible. Other veterans need this, he said quietly. Yes. Not everyone can buy even a condemned cabin. That's why we'll provide them. Veterans with nowhere else to go. Give them a structure, materials, support. Let them rebuild something physical while they rebuild themselves. Eleanor was already planning. He could hear it in her voice. Like what you did, what you're still doing. Nathan thought about it, about the terror of spending his last dollars, about Ranger scratching at the floor, about Morrison's letter and Eleanor's determination and the strange chain of events that had led him from desperation to purpose. I'll help, he said, however I can. Good, Come to Portland next month. We'll formalize the foundation, set up the structures, make this real." After she hung up, Nathan sat with Ranger on the porch. The forest was silent except for wind in the trees. Snow dusted the ground. It was cold, but Nathan was warm in his new winter coat, his repaired boots. He'd come here to disappear, to isolate himself so completely that no one would have to watch him fall apart. Instead, his dog had found a hidden room, a 70-year-old secret, a woman trying to atone for her father's crimes. And somehow, Nathan's desperate escape had become the key to helping others. He didn't believe in fate, didn't believe in divine plans, but he couldn't deny the strange perfection of how things had unfolded. "You're a good dog," he told Ranger. "Best decision I ever made, adopting you." Ranger's tail thumped against the porch. Nathan thought about Martinez, about the explosion, about how some deaths echo forward and some just end, leaving nothing behind but grief. Morrison's death had echoed 70 years, reached across time to protect sacred ground, expose crimes, create change. That was the kind of sacrifice that mattered. Nathan couldn't bring Martinez back, couldn't change what happened in Afghanistan, but maybe he could make sure his friend's death and his own survival meant something beyond just continuing to exist. The Morrison Memorial Fund, the Veteran Housing Initiative, small acts multiplying into larger impact. One condemned cabin, one hidden room, one scratching dog. And from that, ripples spreading outward. Nathan pulled out his phone, texted his brother, "I'm okay, getting better, tell Mom." Then he called the VA hospital, rescheduled his therapy appointments, committed to actually showing up this time. Small steps, manageable steps, forward motion instead of retreat. The cabin creaked in the wind. Ranger pressed against his side. The forest stretched around them, isolated but not imprisoning. Nathan Brooks had bought this place to die slowly. Instead, he'd learned how to start living. 2 years after Nathan bought the cabin, the Morrison Memorial Fund had housed 43 veterans across Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Eleanor's 80th birthday party was held at her Portland estate. Nathan attended reluctantly, Ranger at his side. The event was full of people he didn't know: foundation donors, indigenous leaders, historians, Morrison's descendants. "Nathan Brooks?" An elderly woman approached, leaning on a cane. "I'm Sarah Morrison, Jacob Morrison's great-granddaughter." Nathan shook her hand carefully. "I'm sorry about your great-grandfather." "Don't be sorry, be proud." Her eyes were bright. "For 70 years, my family lived with questions. Why did he die? What happened to his research? Did his sacrifice matter? You answered all of that. You gave us closure. I just found what he left behind. You honored it. That's what matters." She reached into her purse, pulled out a photograph. "This is Jacob, 2 months before he died." The photograph showed a man in his 40s, lean and weathered, standing beside surveying equipment. His eyes were intense, determined. "He looks like someone who wouldn't quit," Nathan said. "He didn't. Neither did you." Sarah tucked the photograph away. "I heard about the program you're building, housing for veterans. I'd like to contribute." "Ms. Morrison, you don't need to." "I want to. My great-grandfather died trying to protect something sacred. You're protecting people who served. Those causes are connected." She smiled. "Besides, stubbornness runs in the Morrison family. I'm not taking no for an answer." By the end of the evening, Sarah had pledged $50,000 to the Veteran Housing Fund. Nathan found Eleanor on the terrace, overlooking the city. "You knew she'd do that," he said. "I hoped." Eleanor smiled. "Kindness multiplies, Nathan. You found Morrison's evidence. I used it to expose my father's crimes. The indigenous tribes got justice. Sarah got closure. And from all that, we built a program that's helped 43 veterans find stability." She turned to him. "That's how it works. One good act creates opportunities for more good acts. Sounds suspiciously like karma. Maybe it is. Maybe the universe actually does reward people who do the right thing. Eleanor's expression turned serious. Or maybe we just choose to multiply kindness when we see it, and that creates its own momentum. Nathan thought about that. About Morrison hiding documents that wouldn't be found for 70 years. About Eleanor spending her final years atoning for her father's sins. About Sarah honoring her great-grandfather by helping strangers. About Nathan buying a condemned cabin because he'd run out of options, and his dog finding the one thing that could transform desperation into purpose. I got an application yesterday, Nathan said. Marine, discharged 3 months ago. PTSD, lost his housing, sleeping in his car. He sounds like I felt 2 years ago. You approving it? Already did. He moves into the Idaho property next week. Nathan leaned against the railing. I'm going to meet him, help him settle in, show him the tools, the materials, what's possible. That's good. Having someone who understands makes all the difference. They stood in comfortable silence. Below, Portland sprawled in every direction, a city built partly on Whitmore money, now being redirected toward justice. I never thanked you properly, Nathan said, for helping me, for seeing past the condemned cabin and the angry veteran to whatever potential you saw. I didn't see potential, I saw character. Eleanor's voice was gentle. You found evidence that could have made you money, given you attention, served your interests. Instead, you thought about Morrison, about what he'd died for, about who deserved to know. She paused. That's who you are. The circumstances, the cabin, the struggles, those were just temporary. Your character was always there. Nathan's throat tightened. I was in a bad place. You were, but you never stopped being someone who cared about doing the right thing. That's rare, Nathan, worth honoring. A month later, Nathan drove to the Idaho property to meet the new resident, a Marine named Christopher Hayes, who reminded Nathan painfully of himself 2 years earlier. Thin, haunted eyes, moving like someone expecting attack. They walked through the property together, another condemned structure, another desperate veteran, another chance. It's not much, Nathan said, but it's yours. No rent for a year. Then income-based after that. We'll help with repairs, provide tools and materials, connect you to medical services. Christopher stared at the cabin like it might disappear. Why are you doing this? Because 2 years ago, I spent my last money on a place like this. I was where you are. If someone had helped me then... Nathan trailed off. Let's just say I know what it means to need a place to rebuild. I don't know if I can rebuild. You don't have to know yet. Just live here, be safe. Figure it out one day at a time. Christopher's eyes filled with tears. I didn't think anyone cared. Someone always cares. Sometimes it just takes a while to find them. They spent the afternoon making the cabin livable, clearing debris, checking structural elements, planning repairs. Ranger supervised, occasionally bringing sticks to Christopher like gifts. Service dog? Christopher asked. Not officially. Rescue. He's got his own trauma. Nathan watched Ranger drop a stick at Christopher's feet. But he's good at reading people. If he likes you, that's a good sign. Does he like me? He brought you his stick. That's dog for you're okay. Christopher almost smiled. First expression that wasn't pain or fear. As Nathan drove away that evening, he thought about chains of kindness. Eleanor helping him helping Christopher. Christopher, someday, hopefully, helping someone else. Morrison's documents, hidden for 70 years, had started all of this. One surveyor's sacrifice, reaching through time to protect sacred ground and heal broken veterans and multiply one act of courage into dozens of acts of compassion. Nathan stopped at a viewpoint, got out with Ranger. Below, the forest stretched to the horizon. Somewhere in those trees, another veteran was starting over. building something from nothing, finding a way forward, because Morrison had hidden evidence, because Nathan had found it, because Eleanor had honored it, because they'd all chosen to multiply kindness instead of hoarding it. His phone buzzed. Text from Eleanor. Christopher called, said you were patient with him, said your dog is magic, said he might actually survive this. Nathan smiled, typed back, he will, same way I did. Because someone helped you? Because someone believed helping was worth it. He pocketed the phone. Ranger pushed against his leg, solid and warm. 2 years ago, Nathan had bought a condemned cabin intending to disappear. Instead, he'd found a 70-year-old mystery that had given him purpose, connected him to people who cared, and taught him that sometimes the greatest discoveries are the ones that lead you back to yourself. Morrison had died trying to protect sacred ground. His death had purchased evidence that waited 70 years to matter. And when it finally did matter, it created ripples that touched indigenous tribes, guilty families, broken veterans, rescue dogs, and all the people who learned that sacrifice doesn't end when someone dies. It echoes forward, multiplying until it becomes something bigger than any one person ever imagined. Nathan looked at Ranger, at the forest, at the road ahead. Come on, buddy, he said, we've got work to do. Because kindness multiplied, because courage echoed, because one condemned cabin and one scratching dog had taught him that sometimes the hardest journeys lead exactly where they're supposed to, toward purpose, toward healing, toward the understanding that survival isn't just about living through something. It's about making sure your survival becomes someone else's hope. One veteran, one rescue dog, one hidden room that waited 70 years to reveal a secret that would change everything. From desperate isolation came purpose, from hidden evidence came justice. From one act of courage, a lifetime of healing for dozens of veterans who needed to know someone still cared. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that their darkest moment might be leading them exactly where they belong. Because sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't about what we find, they're about who we become when we honor what's been lost and multiply the courage of those who came before us.